Hello everyone, Ember Power here, and welcome back to a new video. In this one, I wanted to do something a little bit different in what I would usually do, and in this one, I'd like to have a look at basically the state of single prize Pokemon in the upcoming set, Obsidian Flames. So, for those of you who don't know, I'm a big fan of single prize Pokemon. That should be fairly obvious with this channel, but I'm a big fan of them. I really like playing single prize decks, I think they're a lot of fun. But unfortunately, lately in the TCG, single prize Pokemon have fallen under hard times with, the likes of Sableye and the power creep. And I just kind of wanted to offer some thoughts on the latest ones revealed from Ruler of the Black Flame. I kind of wanted to go into this in more detail during my set review, but I also didn't want to make that video super lengthy either. So I'll just kind of offer some thoughts in this one. Also, for this video, I kind of wanted to ask the question to you guys: how do you feel about single prize Pokemon in the set, as well as just this set in general? Because honestly, the hype for this set was pretty decent when the Charizard was first revealed. But now that we've had the whole set reveal, basically no one's really talking about it online. It's just everyone's kind of fixated on the World Championships and stuff. And I really can't help but feel that's because this set, honestly, is kind of underwhelming. It's pretty underwhelming. There's a lot of kind of mediocre cards. There is some good stuff, but there's nothing super great. There's nothing like Iono from Paldea Evolved. And of course, I know I feel like I have to repeat this every time because otherwise someone will complain in the comments. I understand that not every card has to be broken or even great, but at the same time, it's just a lot of bland, mediocre, or repetitive cards, and hopefully in this video we can take a look at some of those examples. So first up, we have a candidate in the form of Blossom. Now, I did make a community post about this, and someone did correct me. So basically, Blossom has 130 HP, which is only 10 more than the Charizard from the base set. Now, someone very astutely did point out that Blossom, comparing it to Charizard from the base set, was a bit of a mistake because there was an Alakazam in base set that had 8 HP. But still, even that aside, Blossom is still a Pokemon that has low HP right back since the Diamond and Pearl era. And basically, he's just saying that Stage 2s haven't really changed in HP. Now, I did do a recent video where I talked more about Stage 2, so I recommend checking that out if you want my full thoughts on basically those Pokemon. But honestly, it's just a bit of a shame that, Stage 2s in this day and era, where you have Roblox Pokemon that can dish out 180 damage or more per attack, still one-hit killing Stage 2 single prize Pokemon. Just a bit of a shame, honestly. And these attacks, of course, are super underwhelming. Sleep Powder is pathetic, and then Powerful Dance is kind of one of these amazing attacks if you get lucky with a bunch of coin flips. But of course, you will need to get lucky. And, stacking all this energy onto a Pokemon that only has 130 HP, yeah, can be pretty bad. So the next example is probably best to look at this Trevenant, actually. So this Trevenant has the ability Forest Spirit that says, as long as this Pokemon is in the active spot, put 1 damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon during Pokemon Checkup. So that's not on your opponent's bench, it's not on evolution Pokemon, it's not even just on basics, it's just on your opponent's active. Just 1 damage counter, 10 damage. And then it also has the attack Lockup, which does 100 damage for 3 energy. Admittedly 3 colors, which is a bit nicer than 1 grass and 2 colors, but still 3 energy to do 100 damage, and then you get to place a damage counter between turns. So naturally, this Trevenant is trying to go for this trap effect, where you kind of gust up a Pokemon, trap it in the active with Lockup, and then basically chip them away with that extra damage counter. But really, it just seems so slow and underwhelming. For 3 energy, especially when switches and escape ropes are so popular in decks, just feels like such a bad card, to be honest. Even in GLC, this card doesn't feel that good. Maybe I'm wrong on that front, but honestly, it's just such a low amount of damage for, arguably a great effect, but still 1 damage counter between turns. I mean, Trevenant's probably not surviving a turn anyway, so, you're already going to get maybe 10 damage from the ability. Just seems super weak, to be honest. If this was maybe a once per turn thing, you can place a damage counter, okay, maybe that would be too strong, but it would have to be in the active spot to compensate for that. Maybe that would be a lot better, but honestly, just 1 damage counter on your opponent's active just seems really, really weak. So next up, we have a Scavalian, which can double as a fire and a grass type, which sounds pretty cool, but then it only does 110 damage for 3 energy. And double for weakness, that's only going to be 220. And 220 is, of course, pretty underwhelming because most competitive Pokemon have between 280 and 340 HP, so 220 really not going to do it. Of course, there is stuff like Chien-Pao and Miraidon that have lower amounts of HP, so this would be a good answer if we ever got, fire or grass types, or like, well, not grass type, not fire types rather, but, metal types or other grass types that were, competitive and were basics. But still, Scavalian only doing 110 damage base seems pretty underwhelming, and of course, it's fairly difficult to power up without Charm or Reversal Energy. As for the others, I guess we have like Charmander and Chameleon are pretty bland, but this kind of just applies to any Stage 1 basic these days. It's nothing new. Part of the reason why God of War EX, of course, is so successful is because Kirlia is just so good. But unfortunately, that's not the same for other Stage 2s. We also have this, we've got Ninetales over here with the attack Ninetale Dance. Honestly, I kind of like this attack. You're allowed to place 9 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon, which is pretty cool. It's a nice sniping effect, and will also go through Manaphy. But unfortunately, it requires 2 energy, so you have to use either Basin or Reverse Energy. And it says, during your next turn, this Pokemon can't attack. So, like, 120 HP, so you have to assume that your opponent will just KO you anyway. But maybe they don't, for instance. Maybe you're against Lost Zone, and they have a Cramorant, they hit you for 110, you survive, then you can't attack. And then what they're going to do is just switch into a Sableye and then finish you off while targeting down the next Vulpix or something. So, like, Ninetales is just like, why are they hindering a single prize Pokemon that's basically already so mediocre, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's like, this Pokemon wouldn't have survived a hit anyway, really. So why are you nerfing it even more? It's not as if this card has free retreat or a great first attack or, a Vulpix that's really strong. It's just this one attack, which admittedly is a lot more interesting than most other Stage 1s that they print nowadays. But still, 9 damage counters, not a lot really at the end of the day. And still, this Pokemon can't attack next turn. It's just pretty bad. Next up, though, we have this Entei, which is a bit better. It has one of these classic abilities that's been around forever. Basically says this Pokemon takes 20 less damage from attacks. It's a very super niche ability, really, because it's just going to mean that in some instances, you will survive where otherwise you would have been one-hit KO'd. For example, if something does 140 damage to you, which admittedly might be useful in some situations. I really can't think of any where this ability is super great unless you get other modifiers in, like, the Bravery Charm to increase Entei's HP by plus 50. But then we see the attack, Blaze Ball, 50 damage, and then 20 more for each fire energy attaches Pokemon. Super, super low modifier. I mean, they could have made it plus 30, because then it would be rivaling, basic EX Pokemon like Keldeo. But still, plus 20 is super low, and really the only way of powering this up, aside from Basin and Rhyhorn, I guess, is the Charizard that's coming out to accelerate 3 energy. So there is at least some ways of charging up Entei, but still, at that point, you're only doing, 100 damage? Yeah, 120. So it's really nothing too crazy. I mean, you could stack more energy on there if you really wanted to, but you only have 130 HP. It just seems pretty mediocre. Dermantian is like another one of these. If they already have something going on with them, then they do more damage. But 120 for 3 energy is, of course, pathetic. So Dermantian's terrible. We also got a Heatmore, which is another one of these fire-type basics. Supposed to be efficient attacker kind of type stuff. 30 damage for 2 energy, and then 30 more for each energy attached to your opponent's active. So if you have 3 energy, you're still only doing 120, which is just super low. It's not even a 2-hit KO most of the time, so pretty bad. We also have this like Ice QV. Like, I wasn't going to talk about Roblox Pokemon at all this video, but while I'm here, I might as well mention it. The Terra Pokemon in this set are honestly super underwhelming, with the exception of Charizard. That's just my opinion, of course, but they don't seem to be super great aside from that. We've got a Sharpedo, which has an attack that's been reprinted a lot, but unfortunately it's just not a good one. 10 damage, and then 30 more for each colors in your opponent's active retreat cost. Supposed to punish like Pokemon which have like a high retreat cost. But of course, even if you were to tech in Sharpedo into your deck to deal with a Pokemon that has like 4 retreat cost, for example, you're barely doing any damage at all. So like, what's the point in that? What is the point? There is cards in this set like Sharpedo and if I scroll back, the Heatmore maybe, this Entei and the Ninetales that honestly would suit a theme deck format a lot more than they would standard or maybe even GLC at this point. But unfortunately, Pokemon discontinued them. Big shame. Want Theme decks to return at some point, but alas, Sharpedo will never see the light of day. We also have this Seismitoad, which initially I was kind of more lenient towards because I think it could be a fun deck. And maybe it can, it could have some fun with this Seismitoad. But unfortunately, it just comes across as super generic. The ability Quaking Area is an ability I feel like we see in every set almost. As long as this Pokemon is in the active spot, your opponent's active Pokemon's attacks cost 1 colorless more. Super generic ability, yes, it's pretty good, of course, but against stuff like Chien-Pao, Excalibur, yeah, probably not. But it's still a pretty good ability. It can be very annoying to deal with against stuff like Mew, I guess. But again, at the end of the day, a super generic ability that we've seen a lot in the past. Echoed Voice as well, 120 damage, and if this Pokemon survives a turn, is what this wording basically means. During your next turn, this Pokemon's Echoed Voice does 100 more damage. So you can do like 220 for 2 energy, which seems pretty solid, but of course you had to do 120 before, so it's basically a 2-hit KO. And if you have to do a 2-hit KO, you might as well be doing decent amount of damage base, so like 140, 150. This just does 120, so if your opponent switches out, forces a Gust, knocks out Seismitoad, you just lost the value, so it's just kind of bad, really. For stage 2, it's just kind of bad. Be kind of cool in GLC, I guess, but the main point of this video is to talk about single prizers in Standard. Not everyone plays GLC, not everyone wants to play GLC, and of course, GLC is super niche at the end of the day, so it is unfortunate. I wish GLC was more prominent in the TCG, but sadly it's not, and we do have to look at things from a more standard and general point of view. Next up, though, we've got Beartech. 170 damage, flip a coin of tails, discard all the energy. I don't think we need to say any more of that. Cragonal, which has the attack fast freeze, which is kind of interesting. If you go second and it's your first turn, exclusively your first turn, your opponent's active is now paralyzed. So that's kind of cool, but if it's your first turn going second, then it probably means your opponent can just evolve on their next turn, or at the very least find a switch, and that's obviously pretty easy to do. Then after that, Cragonal's just doing 30 damage, 1 energy, which is, of course, super bad. Doesn't even have free retreat. Then we have a Finzian, which honestly has a super good attack. I kind of wish more evolving basics would have this attack. Bird Evolution is, of course, great. It also has, decent synergy with the Palafin. Palafin is just, an example, I think, of how bad the power creep has gone, because if Palafin had released, I've said this several times now, but if Palafin had released, in the Sun and Moon era, for example, this card would have been so good. Jet Punch, 30 damage, and then 30 Snipe is basically the attack that Buzzwole GX had. Admittedly, this is a stage 1, that was a basic. Then it has the attack Justice Kick, that for 2 energy, just 2 energy, 210 damage, and then has the setback, if this Pokemon didn't move from the bench to the active spot this turn, this attack does nothing. So the Justice Kick side effect is nothing too bad to worry about, because we do have stuff like Cleffa that we can promote and use in the early game, as well, of course, the Finzian that we looked at. So there is easy ways of getting Palafin's Justice Kick to work, but 210 damage for 2 energy, so you have to Raihan every turn and stuff, isn't really that good. And that's the crazy thing about this card, is that this isn't even great. It's kind of mediocre at best. The Titan in Zoroark box kind of fills this niche already. And 210, it's just not what it was. 210, of course, against something even Glimmora over here has 270. Glimmora is supposed to be on the lower end of HP, I guess, for Pokemon. 270 HP, we've got a Rev Room over here with 280. And, that's not even, the highest HP that a competitive Pokemon has. And you're still only doing 210. I can't remember if Chien-Pao has 210 or 220. It might be 220, but it could be 210, I guess. If it is 210, then that's good. You at least knock out Chien-Pao. If not, then, yeah, 210. It's just not a lot of damage. I'm just going to repeat myself until I lose my mind here. But, yeah, Palafin, really not something too great. It'd be a fun deck at the end of the day. And that is a point that's also worth mentioning. I'm not saying that these cards won't make for fun decks and you won't have fun playing them on the ladder. I'm just saying, compared to Roblox Pokemon, they just seem super underwhelming. And they often have, all these ridiculous setbacks that just kind of mean nothing, and it hurts a lot. We got this Electros with Suction Shock, which is a cool name for an attack, actually, but 60 damage, you get to pull something up, and then flip a coin if heads, Paralysis. Super underwhelming. We do have the Sundara, which is kind of interesting because it implies that we won't get bench protection until a while after this set comes out. So the ability Bad Weather says, as long as this Pokemon is in the active spot, prevent all damage done to your bench Pokemon by attacks. So it's a bit weird that they printed this. It kind of means that if they are going to do another Manaphy, it will be a while after Sundara, if I had to take a guess. And it also has the attack Gigantobolt, which does 140 damage for 2 lightning and then 90 to itself, which of course is super brutal. It doesn't even do like 60 or 50, it does 90, which just means you're that bit much more weak to Sableye, which really, really sucks. And, if something flicks you basically or pokes you even, you'll just get KO'd. So super kind of bad attack, I guess. You could make this work in a fluffy box, but there's already like Regieleki and stuff. Honestly, I don't think the Sundara is the worst single price Pokemon in the set. It's probably one of the better ones, to be honest, but still a kind of underwhelming Pokemon. Next up is we have a Toxicity that for 1 lightning and a colorless on the stage 1, so pretty steep requirements already. 50 damage and then 30 more for each different type of Pokemon on your bench. So really, if we're going to get all those Pokemon into play, we'd expect the damage to be pretty solid. We'd expect it to be pretty decent. But really, the most damage you're ever going to be doing with this is what, 200 damage roughly? So you're not even going to care with V-Star if you have a full bench of different unique Pokemon. So it's just super underwhelming card. You still to it killing stuff, but at the end of the day, you need a Lightning and a Colorless or Reverse Energy if you're losing the game. So, which to be honest, you probably will be, let's face it. You could use like Luminous Energy and Raihan, but honestly, Toxicity, kind of underwhelming. We do have a Belly Bolt, which can be immune to lightning Pokemon, which is kind of cool. Then the attack just does 100 damage and nothing else for 3 energy. Super underwhelming. Cleffa, really cool Pokemon, actually one of the better single price Pokemon in the set. We then have this Toga Kiss, which has an ability which is okay, but you could just get Ionoed or Judged. Now, you could make the argument, your opponent won't be able to do that every turn, which is true, but if your entire engine is kind of focused around Toga Kiss, that is a bit of a problem, to be honest, because it does mean you can be disrupted on key turns potentially. So Toga Kiss, kind of underwhelming. At least has free retreat though, that's cool. It's a bit bulkier than some of the other stage 2s, and the attack isn't terrible either, so I kind of like Toga Kiss. I don't think it'll be super great though, but it is kind of cool. We have an Espeon, which is underwhelming, I think. Lunatone, which requires Solar Rock in play to prevent all effects of Stadium cards done to your Pokemon. Like, this would have just been a lot more interesting if it just said, this Pokemon needs a basic energy attached to or something. That would have been way more of a universally better effect, I would say, honestly. Like, because stadiums that disrupt you aren't so popular in TCG with, like, the exception of Path to the Peak, so just the fact that they're basically saying if you want to prevent Path to the Peak, you have to have a Lunatone and a Solar Rock in play. Just seems kind of weak. I know Solar Rock has Call for Family, which is kind of cool, but at the same time, I really don't think these Pokemon will be doing anything. We have a Claydo with Kaboom Doll, which is another one of these. You shrink your opponent's active Pokemon's HP down to 10, and then Claydo just knocks itself out, which is super unfortunate. It doesn't say KO itself, that specification, so you could increase Claydo's HP and survive the attack, which is cool at least, but at the end of the day, it's not the greatest effect in the world. This Vespiquen EX, honestly, super disappointed in this. I really hope there'd be a decent grass Pokemon. I know this is Psychic type, but whatever, I don't care. It uses grass energy. Still grass type to me. Unfortunately, this card is super weak. Phantom Queen, 200 damage is just a steep requirement, to say the least. You have to use Gardenia, or at the very least use Charm to accelerate some grass energy to a Combi before you evolve, which does seem kind of awkward, to be honest. It means that if you have to Iono for like more energy, you can't, evolve into Vespiquen. You have to Iono more energy, attach them, and then hope you can find the Vespiquen off the new hand. Just seems all a bit pedantic and a bit too much work for an attack that's only going to do 200 damage most of the time, and then 3 damage counters to each of your opponent's bench Pokemon if they're already damaged. So honestly, just a super underwhelming card, unfortunately. Big shame, but could be a fun deck to try out. We do have this Houndstorm, which does 80 damage, and if your opponent has exactly 2 or 4 prize cards remaining, so very specific attack, this attack does 120 more, so you're doing 200, but we know this Titan does 220 for reverse energy, so that's just a lot better. But at least I guess you have a psychic option for Zoroark box. And we have a Larvitar line, Pupitar. We've got the Bonzi, which is cute, but unfortunately it's not really going to see any play. Stunfisk, 5 damage counters if it's knocked out. I mean, come on, guys. Pyukumuku did 6 damage counters when it was knocked out. and that was in Sun and Moon base set. Sun and Moon base set. This is like the third set of the Scarlet and Violet era, and we're doing less damage counter. And on top of that, we need a tool card attached to him. So yeah, Stunfisk, terrible card. Diggersby, just mill 1 card, 120 damage. I mean, they weren't even trying with this Diggersby, honestly. This wasn't even like mill 3 or something. Yeah, terrible card. We have a Lycanroc, which does 90 damage, which sounds kind of cool because it means you can maybe get a cheeky kill on an Evolving Basic. But unfortunately, that's not the case because your opponent's active Pokemon has to have damage counters on them. We have some Glimmets and Glimmora, which honestly I think Glimmora could be like a solid tier 2 deck. That's nice. Charizard EX, which is honestly one of the better cards in the set. I've seen some people say this is worse than the Charizard from the next set, which honestly I think is super sketch for that opinion. I'm really not sure that's true, but yeah, honestly I think this Charizard could be really strong, especially because it's a dark type, which is great for hitting weakness on stuff, but honestly, I don't know. I really like this Charizard. I think it's pretty strong, but we'll have to see, I guess, in testing. Paldean Whippers, I guess. Paldean Quagsire. Quagsire? Yeah. Paldean Quagmire. Venoshock, 80 damage. If opponent's active is poisoned, does 120 more. So again, another one of these. If you hit a certain condition, you do a lot more damage, but of course the condition is pretty awkward. You could use Paldean Quagsire EX, but, you know, seems pretty underwhelming. We have an Umbreon with 50 snipe, you know, in this day and age. Really nothing great. We've got a Houndoom, which can do 130 damage if your opponent's active as an evolution. Darkrai can move energy. We've got a Malamar that can just look at the top card of either player's deck. We do have a Scizor over here, which does 10 damage and then 50 more for each of your opponent's Pokemon in play with an ability. Honestly, I know a lot of people really like this card, but seeing this card was just kind of a bit of a nail in the coffin for me personally, because I've been talking a lot lately about how Pokemon seem extra lazy when it comes to reprinting and reusing old ideas. Like, we've just seen a Flapple in the Sword and Shield era with an attack that was just like this. We've also seen a Weavile in the Sun and Moon era with an attack just like this. You know, we're really going to reprint this attack every single era, basically. It just seems kind of bland and boring, to be honest, that they really couldn't think of anything new to add to the TCG. They just have to reprint an old effect. Similar story, honestly, for this Mawile over here, which has the ability Special Eater. We've seen this kind of ability before on a GX Pokemon. So I guess it's on a single Parser, which is better, but still. We have a Probopass, which does 160, next turn it can't attack. Similar problems as before. Got a King Gambit, which says your opponent's active has 4 more damage counters on it. It's knocked out. Now, there was a Gengar, which does the same attack, but for 3 damage counters. So I think that was only X and Y era, actually. Yeah, X, Y era. So pretty interesting, worth bearing in mind. But still, King Gambit, I don't think this card is super great. Revroom, we've got an Altaria, which, yeah, Altaria is pretty bad. Not worth talking about. Pidgeot, I guess Pidgeot is kind of like the one that everyone's sort of hyping up into oblivion, but it's kind of like, well, it's not terrible, of course, but, you know, it is a stage 2 that you've got to fit into your deck, so yeah, a bit of a worry there. We've got a Kangaskhan, which is literally just a theme deck Pokemon, nothing more than that. Got an Eevee, which is fine. A Linoone, which is just straight up bulk again. Some Buttlebees, some nice Lechonks, which is cool. Got a Lechonk on Rainbow Road, which is always nice to see. And an Oinkologne, which is another one of these. You flip a bunch of coins, and for each heads you get to retrieve a resource card, which is nice, I guess, for control, but still nothing too crazy. Then we've got a Flamigo, which does 60 damage, and if you have another Flamigo on your bench, also does 60 snipe to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Now, I'm not sure who was it, if it was like Beware of a Terrible or something that said if we got Telescopic Sight back, then this attack would honestly be better, because honestly, I kind of agree with that. You know, if we get some decent snipe buffs, then maybe this could be good, but 60 snipe, 60 T active just doesn't seem great. And then the trainers, you know, we talked about trainers before, they're nothing too crazy, but yeah, Obsidian and Power, let me know what you think of single price Pokemon. Do you think they're reusing too many ideas? Do you think they're getting more boring, more bland? But yeah, Obsidian and Power, thank you for watching.